Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are and whatever you're doing. I hope you're having a fantastic day. In this video, we're going to be looking at an insanely powerful build that I stumbled upon as I was preparing the footage for the most recent video in my weapons tournament series. If you haven't checked that out yet, I strongly suggest you do. It's amazing. I love the new format that I'm doing. Basically, I'm rating the absolute best weapon for each category, and a link to that will be down below. And during the most recent episode, where we reviewed spears, I discovered a love for an Ash of War that I've only used very briefly before, and I have discovered exactly how insanely powerful it can be for dealing effectively with every single enemy in the game. As you can see, I'm mopping up bosses and enemies with ease. And if you didn't already know, this Ash of War is of course the Phantom Slash. So let's talk about why it's so good and how you can get the most out of this insanely powerful Ash of War and incorporate it into your next build. Please note, you can't get this Ash of War too early because it's dropped by the Knights Cavalry northeast of the Forbidden Lands site of Grace. So you do need to have defeated Morgott before you can get here. However, if you follow my guide for how to get overpowered fast, you can get a max level weapon in 2 hours. So it's actually very quick and easy for you to get here, destroy Morgott, and grab this Ash of War super early. Again, I'll leave the link to that down below in case you haven't seen it. Because once you've done that, you're now ready to go. You have the Phantom Slash. Let's put it to use. Firstly, it can only be applied to twin blades, spears, halberds, and reapers, which still gives you a lot of variety. And for this video, I have opted to apply it to the Grave Scythe, because even though it does require some farming, you can get it as early as Liurnia. Now that you know how to get the Ash of War, let's talk about why it's so good and go into the specifics. The first main draw for me with this Ash of War was something I discovered entirely on accident. I was fighting a dragon, they reared up their head to roar at me just as I cast Phantom Slash, and my Phantom soared up into the air and still slashed his head, dealing that critical damage hit. And I had no idea this Ash could do that. That then led me to do some more testing. Because if it can fly towards the specific body parts that you're targeting, that means this is effective in so many situations with very fast bosses that love to move out the way of your attacks. Dragons are a perfect example because their weak point is their head and you can't always reach their head, but your Phantom usually can. Other great examples is any enemy or boss where it's beneficial for you to be able to target a specific part of them. The next great example that comes to my head is actually Astel. Both Astel, Natural Born of the Void, and the Stars of Darkness version would become considerably easier with an Ash of War like this. The next thing that makes this so great is the fact that you have the ability to switch targets halfway through the attack, meaning that both you and your Phantom will attack 2 different targets. If you're trying to clear up groups of low-level enemies, it means you are going to clear them up twice as quickly. It's super efficient, looks really cool, and makes you feel like a total badass. Being able to juggle the targets like this makes for some really unique and interesting plays. And once you've got some practice with this and you know exactly how far away you can be from enemies, you can use the Phantom to bait out so many enemies' attacks and even guard counters, so that by the time you've gone in for your follow-up attack, the enemy has already reacted and completely missed you with their attack. I won't pretend that the build I'm running is the absolute most perfect way to use this build, but as you can see, it's damn powerful. So let me talk you through what I'm using, and people in the comments may even be able to one-up my build and make this even stronger than it is here. Another amazing thing to note is the damage to FP ratio of this Ash of War is insanely efficient. It only costs 8 FP per use, and you can use it twice. There is a follow-up attack. So in total, both you and your Phantom will attack twice for a total of 4 attacks at only 16 FP. With every single one of them attacks, as you see here, depending on the enemy and your build, dealing upwards of 1,000 damage. And we haven't even scratched the surface on exactly how powerful Phantom Slash can be. For instance, did you know the Phantom also applies all status effects? That means if you coat your weapon in poison or bleed, etc., the Phantom will apply the exact same amount. Meaning during your 4-hit combo, you can apply insane amounts of status effects to your enemies. And talking of status effects, buffs work the same way. So if you go and infuse your weapon with something like a heavy, keen, or quality infusion, this means you can then buff your weapon with Black Flame Blade, Blood Blade, something like that, along with applying your regular buffs, for instance, Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength. All of these will apply to you and your weapon and your Phantom when they attack. meaning this is one of the most devastating 4-hit combos in the game. And again, at the beginning of the video, I mentioned that it's so good that you can deal effectively with every single enemy type in the game. A great example of this is actually applying something like Flame Art or Sacred to it, because if you have enemies that are fairly resistant to most status effects, then applying additional bleed or putting poison on top isn't going to be as effective. So if you apply Flame Art or Sacred, that's going to maximize the raw damage output. Obviously, you're dealing elemental damage. Don't use Sacred if you're fighting Radagon. Don't use Fire if you're fighting something like Rykard or Magma Worms. And before we move on to the next section, circling back around to status effects. If you do apply colds to this weapon, pretty much every single enemy in the game that isn't immune to cold will become immediately frostbitten within just one combo, because the cold build-up you can apply to this is massive. And I haven't even mentioned the fact that you can combine this with your Mimic tier, and all 4 of you, your Mimic, and both your Phantoms will be dealing all of these status effects and all of this damage. It can become absolute hell for any enemy you're fighting, and nothing will stand a chance against you. As for your actual build, that entirely depends on what weapon you decide to apply this to. I'm currently on one of my level 200 characters, and as you can see, my stat alignment is very silly at the moment, because this is the character I use to test the majority of weapons. So I could definitely have a much better stat alignment and have this dealing even more damage. But even so, with pretty much just 50 in all stats, you can see this has been absolutely devastating. And finally, if we take a look at the talismans that you can use in tandem, 2 of my favourites are always the Greatjar's Arsenal or the Erdtree's Favour Plus 2. Depending on if you need a bit extra equip load so that you can wear a tankier armor set. My absolute favourite of all the defense talismans is the Dragon Crest Great Shield. It is not lying when it says it enormously boosts your physical damage negation. Of course, an absolute must is the Shard of Alexander, because that is going to greatly boost the attack power of your Phantom Slash. And depending on the buffs you're using, maybe even the Old Lord's Talisman, so that you don't have to reapply them as often and you can fight for longer without a break. Though you're going to be killing things so quickly that that one isn't too vital. So depending on the status effects you're relying on, maybe switch it out for something like the Lord of Blood's Exaltation, because you're probably going to be proccing blood loss quite frequently. Also, depending on how many of the talismans I've just listed that you actually find you need, then one of any of the 4 heirlooms to fill your final slot, just to give yourself that little bit extra damage, is always a really great shout. And that is it for how to get the absolute most out of probably my new favourite Ash of War in the game. I hope you have as much fun with it as I did. And as always, my friends, all that's left for me to say is thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an amazing day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.